Captain Kim Woo stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Resilience, watching the ice planet Kethra 7 grow larger on the main screen. The world looked like a giant white marble floating in space. No green lands, no blue oceans, just endless, snow and ice covering everything. "How are our systems looking, Hansol?" Woo asked his engineer. Lee Hansol checked his screens and nodded. "All good, Captain. Engines running smooth. Life support is perfect." Navigator Park Subin turned from her station. "We should reach the planet's atmosphere in 20 minutes, sir. The survey mission calls for a 3-day stay to collect ice samples and check for mineral deposits." Dr. Choi Mina, their medical officer, looked up from her tablet. "I've prepared the cold weather gear. The surface temperature is -40 degrees. We'll need full environmental suits for any groundwork." Wu smiled at his crew. They had worked together for 2 years, exploring new worlds for the Human Space Agency. This mission seemed simple compared to their last trip to a jungle planet full of poisonous plants and angry creatures. "This should be easy," Wu said. "Just ice and rocks. What could go wrong?" The words had barely left his mouth when alarms started screaming throughout the ship. "Captain," Subin shouted over the noise. "Massive electromagnetic storm coming from the planet. It wasn't showing on our long-range sensors." The ship began to shake. Lights flickered on and off. Wu grabbed his chair as the deck tilted under his feet. "Hansol, what's happening to our systems?" The engineer's face was pale as he worked frantically at his controls. "The storm is frying our electronics. Navigation is down. Engine control is failing. I can't stop our descent." Through the main window, Wu could see they were falling toward the planet's surface. The white ground rushed up to meet them. Lightning crackled around the ship in colors he had never seen before. "Emergency landing procedures," Wu ordered. "Everyone strap in. Send a distress signal on all frequencies." "Communications are dead, sir," Subin reported. "The storm killed everything." The ship hit the atmosphere and began to burn. The hull groaned and screamed as it heated up. Inside, the crew held on as their world shook apart around them. "Hull breach in Section 4, Mina called out. "Pressure dropping fast." "Sealing emergency doors," Hansol replied, his voice tight with fear. Wu watched helplessly as his ship died around him. The Resilience had been their home among the stars. Now it was becoming their tomb. The ground came up fast. Too fast. "Brace. For impact," Wu yelled. The ship hit the frozen surface of Kethra 7 like a meteor. Metal twisted and broke. Glass shattered. The lights went out. Then silence. Wu woke up in darkness. His head pounded and something warm ran down his face. Blood. He tasted metal in his mouth and his left arm felt wrong, probably broken. "Subin? Hansol? Mina?" He called out. No answer came back. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting red, shadows everywhere. Wu looked around the destroyed bridge. His chair had saved his life, but his crew had not been so lucky. Subin lay crushed under a fallen beam. Her eyes stared at nothing. Hansol was buried under twisted metal, clearly dead. Mina had been thrown against the far wall. She was not moving. Wu was alone. He tried to stand but fell back down. His legs felt weak and shaky. The cold was already creeping into the ship through the broken hull. His breath came out in white clouds. The ship's computer still worked somehow. A weak voice spoke from hidden speakers. "Life support failing. Hull integrity compromised. Estimate 20 minutes before complete system failure." 20 minutes. Then the ship would become as cold as the world outside. Wu forced himself to stand. He had to try to survive. Maybe rescue would come. Maybe other ships had heard their last transmission before the storm hit. He made his way through the destroyed corridors, stepping over debris and trying not to look at the other dead crew members he found. The ship had carried 32 people. He seemed to be the only one still breathing. In the equipment bay, he found an environmental suit that still worked. The thick, insulated outfit would keep him alive in the deadly cold outside, at least for a while. The suit's power cell showed 6 hours of heat remaining, 6 hours to find shelter or die. Wu sealed himself inside the suit and activated its systems. Warm air flowed around his body. The heads-up display showed outside temperature -42 degrees and falling as night approached. He gathered what supplies he could find. A small medical kit, some food packets, a hand scanner that might help him find shelter. Everything else was broken or scattered. The ship's computer spoke again, weaker now. Life support failure in 5 minutes. Recommend immediate evacuation. Wu walked to the main airlock. Through the small window he could see an endless white landscape under a gray sky. Snow fell steadily, driven by howling wind. No signs of life anywhere. He opened the airlock and stepped outside. The cold hit him like a physical blow, even through the environmental suit. The wind tried to knock him down. Snow stung his helmet's faceplate, making it hard to see more than a few meters ahead. Behind him, the Resilience settled deeper into the snowdrift where it had crashed. Soon it would be buried completely, just another bump in the endless white landscape. Wu picked a direction and started walking. The hand scanner showed some rocky hills about 2 kilometers away. Maybe he could find a cave or some other shelter there. But after an hour of fighting through the deep snow and cutting wind, his suit's power was draining faster than expected. The cold was too much for the heating system. His legs felt heavy. Each step became harder than the last. The rocky hills still looked far away. After another hour, Wu fell down in the snow and could not get back up. His suit's heating system was failing. Cold crept into his boots and gloves. His fingers and toes went numb. The heads-up display flashed red warnings. Power at 15%. Heating system compromised. Life support critical. Wu tried to stand, but his legs would not obey him anymore. He was dying, alone on this frozen world just like his crew. No one would ever know what happened to them. He lay back in the snow and looked up at the gray sky. Snow landed on his helmet's faceplate and did not melt anymore. The suit was too cold now. As darkness crept into the edges of his vision, Wu thought he saw something moving through the snowstorm. A large shadow, much bigger than any human. It seemed to be watching him. Then everything went black and Captain Kim Wu knew no more. Thekvar smelled the burning metal long before he saw the crashed ship. The massive Kyrathi warrior stood 3 meters tall, covered in thick gray fur that kept him warm in the endless winter of his world. His people had lived on Cathara 7 for thousands of years, and they knew every scent the wind could carry. This smell was different. Wrong. It came from the sky. Thekvar moved through the snowstorm with ease. His large feet spread his weight so he did not sink deep into the drifts. His thick claws gave him grip on the ice. The howling wind that would kill most creatures was just another part of home to him. He had been hunting when the burning thing fell from the sky. The crash shook the ground and scared away all the ice rabbits he had been tracking. Now he followed the strange smell to see what had disturbed his hunt. The elders of his tribe always warned about things that fell from the sky. They called them sky demons and said they brought nothing but trouble. The old stories told of metal beings that came from the stars to steal and kill. But Thekvar was curious. He had always been different from the other Kyrathi. While they feared the unknown, he wanted to understand it. The crashed ship looked like a broken mountain of metal half buried in snow. Steam rose from its hot hull as the cold air touched it. Thekvar circled the wreckage carefully, using all his senses to learn about this strange thing. He could smell death inside the metal shell, many deaths. But there was something else. A different scent, weak but still alive. Thekvar followed his nose to where a trail led away from the ship. Something had walked through the snow, leaving marks too small for Kyrathi feet. The trail was already being covered by new snow, but his sharp eyes could still see it. He followed the trail for 2 kilometers. The footprints got deeper and more uneven as he went. Whatever made them was getting weaker, struggling more with each step. Then he found the still form lying in the snow. It was smaller than a Kyrathi, standing only about 2 meters if it could stand at all. It wore some kind of artificial skin that covered its whole body. The skin was thick and padded, like it was meant to keep warmth inside. Thekvar had never seen a sky demon before. but the elders had described them as evil creatures with pale skin and small, weak bodies. This thing matched those descriptions, but it was dying. The artificial skin was cold now, colder than it should be for a living thing. The creature inside was barely breathing. Soon the cold would take it completely. Thekvar stood over the dying sky demon and felt something stir deep in his chest. His people called it Velthak, the ancient duty to protect the helpless against the killing cold. It was the most sacred law of the Kairathi people. Even their worst enemies deserved mercy from the cold. The sensible thing would be to leave the sky demon to die. His tribe would expect that. The elders would demand it. Sky demons were dangerous. They brought bad luck and trouble, but Velthak was stronger than fear or common sense. Thekvar bent down and carefully lifted the unconscious creature. It weighed almost nothing in his powerful arms. He could feel how cold it had become through the artificial skin. Death was very close now. He turned toward his home cave and began the long journey through the storm. Thekvar lived alone, as was proper for an unmated warrior. His cave was carved into a rocky hill, deep enough to stay warm and safe from the worst storms. He had worked for years to make it comfortable with sleeping furs, a fire pit, and storage spaces for food and tools. He carried the sky demon inside and laid it near his fire. The artificial skin was completely cold now. Whatever heat source it used had failed. Thekvar had helped injured animals before. He knew that warming something too fast could kill it. He banked his fire to give gentle heat and began to examine his strange patient. The artificial skin had seams and connections that looked like they could be opened. After some careful work, Thekvar found the right spots and began to remove the outer layer. Underneath was another layer, thinner but still covering the whole body. And under that, finally, was the sky demon itself. It was even stranger than Thekvar had expected. The skin was pale pink, almost white, with no fur at all. The face was flat with a small nose and strange eyes that were closed now. Dark hair covered only the top of its head. How could something so weak survive anywhere, even in warm lands? The sky demon was barely breathing. Its skin felt like ice. Thekvar could see dark patches on the fingers and toes where the cold had damaged the flesh. He knew what to do. It was the same treatment his people used for their own when the cold took them too far. Thekvar stripped off his own heavy fur cloak and lay down beside the dying creature. He pulled his warm furs over both of them and pressed his body close to share his heat. His thick fur and natural warmth began to drive the cold from the sky demon's body. For hours, Thekvar held the strange creature against him, breathing warm, air on its face and keeping it from sliding into the final cold sleep. Sometimes it shivered violently. Sometimes it stopped breathing for long moments that made Thekvar's heart race with worry. But slowly, very slowly, warmth returned to the pale skin. The breathing became stronger and more regular. The sky demon's heart beat steadier against Thekvar's chest. As the long night passed, Thekvar found himself studying the creature's face. It did not look evil or dangerous. It looked young and hurt and far from home. Whatever brought it to this world, it had not come by choice. When morning light filtered into the cave, the sky demon was still alive. Its skin had color now instead of the deadly white of deep cold. It slept peacefully under the warm furs. Thekvar got up carefully and added wood to his fire. He prepared warm broth from dried meat and herbs. If the sky demon woke up, it would need food and drink. He looked at his patient again and wondered what would happen next. The elders would be angry when they learned what he had done. His own people might turn against him for saving a sky demon, but Velthak had been satisfied. The cold had not won this time. Thekvar settled down to watch over the strange creature and wait for it to wake up. When it did, everything would change for both of them. Kimwu woke up feeling warm for the first time since the crash. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the soft light of a fire. He was lying on thick furs that smelled wild but clean. The air around him was warm and dry. He tried to sit up and immediately felt dizzy. His body ached everywhere and his left arm was wrapped in some kind of plant fiber bandage, but he was alive, which seemed impossible. Then he saw his rescuer. The creature sat across the fire from him, watching quietly. It was huge, easily 3 times Wu's size, covered in thick gray fur. The face was like a cross between a wolf and a bear, with intelligent golden eyes that studied him carefully. Wu's first instinct was fear. This thing could kill him with one swipe of its massive claws. But something in those golden eyes stopped his panic. There was no anger there, no hunger. Just curiosity and what looked almost like concern. The creature noticed he was awake and made a soft rumbling sound. It reached beside itself and picked up a wooden bowl, offering it to Wu. Steam rose from the bowl. It smelled like meat broth, with herbs. Wu's stomach growled loudly, reminding him he had not eaten since before the crash. He reached out carefully and took the bowl. The broth was warm and tasted better than anything from the ship's food systems. As he drank, Wu noticed, the creature watching every sip with what seemed like satisfaction. When he finished, Wu set the bowl down and looked around the cave. It was clearly a home, not just a shelter. Tools hung on the walls. Dried meat and plants were stored in neat piles. The sleeping area was arranged with care and comfort in mind. This creature was intelligent. Very intelligent. Wu pointed to himself and said slowly, "Wu, my name is Wu." The creature tilted its massive head and made another rumbling sound. Then it pointed to itself with one huge finger and said something that sounded like, "Tekvar." "Tekvar," Wu repeated, trying to get the pronunciation right. The creature, Tekvar, made what might have been a pleased sound. He pointed at Wu again and tried to copy the human sounds. Wah, close enough. Wu smiled and nodded. "Yes, Wu." Over the following days, they developed ways to communicate. Pointing, gestures, simple drawings in the dirt. Wu learned that Tekvar lived alone in this cave. He hunted for food and gathered plants for medicine. He had found Wu dying in the snow and brought him here. Why, Wu could not understand yet. But he was grateful. As his strength returned, Wu began to help around the cave. His smaller size and different skills were useful in ways Tekvar had not expected. Wu could reach into narrow spaces to retrieve dropped items. His knowledge of tools and engineering let him improve some of Tekvar's equipment. When Tekvar showed him a hunting spear with a loose point, Wu used techniques from his engineering training to bind it more securely. The improvement was obvious, and Tekvar made pleased rumbling sounds. Wu found parts from his environmental suit that still worked. The small power cell could run LED lights for weeks. He set up a better lighting system in the cave, much brighter than the fire alone. Tekvar was fascinated by the lights. He touched them carefully, amazed that they gave light without heat. When Wu showed him how to turn them on and off, Tekvar practiced the motion over and over like a child with a new toy. In return, Tekvar taught Wu about survival on this frozen world. He showed him which plants could be eaten and which were poisonous. He demonstrated how to read the weather signs and predict when storms were coming. Most importantly, he taught Wu how to move through the snow without wasting energy or leaving tracks that predators could follow. One morning, Tekvar returned from hunting with a worried expression. He had brought back 2 ice rabbits, but something was clearly bothering him. He drew pictures in the dirt near the fire, stick figures that looked like more of his people. He pointed outside, then at the drawings, then at Wu. His body language showed fear and anger. Other Kirathi had found signs of the human. That afternoon they came. Wu heard them before he saw them, deep voices calling out in the Kirathi language. Tekvar's whole body went tense. He gestured for Wu to stay back in the shadows of the cave. 3 Kirathi appeared at the cave entrance. They were all as large as Tekvar, but older. Their fur was darker, and they carried themselves with the authority of leaders. The one in front had scars across his face and arms that spoke of many battles. The scarred leader spoke in harsh tones to Tekvar. Even without understanding the words, Wu could hear the anger in his voice. The other 2 flanked their leader, ready for trouble. Tekvar responded calmly, but his hands moved to rest on his weapon handles. The conversation grew more heated. The scarred leader pointed at Wu several times, his voice rising. Finally, the leader stepped forward and drew a long bone knife. He pointed it at Wu and barked what was clearly an order. Thekvar moved between them. He said one word, firm and final. The word carried such weight that all three visitors stopped talking. The scarred leader stared at Thekvar for a long moment. Then he spoke again, quieter but no less angry. It sounded like a warning or threat. Thekvar did not back down. He spoke the same word again, even more firmly. The leader put away his knife, but his expression promised this was not over. He said something else to Thekvar, then looked at Wu with obvious disgust. The three Karathi turned and left without another word. After they were gone, Thekvar sat down heavily by the fire. He looked tired and sad. Wu did not need to understand the language to know what had happened. Thekvar had chosen to protect him, even against his own people. That night, as they shared their evening meal, Wu tried to understand what that choice meant. These creatures, the Karathi, clearly had rules about contact with outsiders. Thekvar had broken those rules to save his life. Now Thekvar was in trouble with his tribe because of that choice. Wu looked across the fire at his rescuer and friend. Thekvar had given up his place among his own people to keep one human alive. It was the kind of sacrifice that Wu had only read about in stories. He did not know how to repay such a gift, but he knew he would try to be worthy of it. Outside, the wind howled through the rocks, and snow continued to fall. Winter was getting worse, and both human and Karathi knew the real tests were still coming. The storm came 3 days after the tribal elders visited. Wu had never seen anything like it in his years of space exploration. The wind screamed like a living thing, carrying snow so thick that he could not see his hand in front of his face. Inside, the cave. Thekvar paced nervously. His golden eyes kept looking toward the entrance where the storm raged. Every few minutes, he would make worried sounds deep in his throat. "What is it?" Wu asked, though he knew Thekvar could only understand. A few human words. Thekvar drew pictures in the dirt. His people's village, the storm, stick figures lying still. He pointed outside and shook his massive head. Wu understood. This storm was worse than normal, bad enough to threaten the entire tribe. Through their growing communication system of gestures and simple words, Thekvar explained more. The Karathi villages used traditional shelters made of ice blocks and animal skins. They worked fine for normal winter storms, but this was no normal storm. The wind was too strong. The cold was too deep. The tribal shelters would not hold. Wu thought about the scarred elder who had threatened him, the leader who clearly hated humans and wanted Thekvar to abandon his sky demon friend. Now that same leader and his people faced death from the storm. "We have to help them," Wu said. Thekvar looked at him with surprise. He pointed at Wu, then at the drawings of his angry tribe, then shook his head as if to say, "They hate you." "Does not matter," Wu replied. He had learned enough Karathi words to make himself understood. Help must help. For the next hour, Wu explained his idea using drawings, gestures, and the few words they shared. The crashed ship still had parts they could use. The power core was damaged, but not dead. If they could get to it and bring back the right components, Wu could build a heating system powerful enough to warm the whole tribal village. But getting to the ship meant going out into the killing storm. The wreckage was 2 kilometers away, through conditions that would freeze a person solid in minutes. Thekvar understood the plan, but he also understood the danger. He drew pictures of the journey, the deep snow, the cutting wind, the cold that could stop a heart. Then he drew himself, making the trip alone. "No," Wu said firmly. "We go together." Thekvar shook his head. He pointed at Wu's smaller body, then at the storm. A human could not survive that journey, even in the best environmental suit. But Wu had an idea for that too. Working together, they modified Wu's environmental suit using furs and materials from the cave. Thekvar's knowledge of cold weather survival combined with Wu's understanding of technology. They created a hybrid system that might, just might, keep a human alive in the storm. More importantly, Wu could guide them to exactly the right parts of the ship. He knew every corridor and system. In the blinding storm, That knowledge could save hours of searching, hours they did not have. As they prepared for the journey, Thekvar kept looking at his human friend with something like amazement. This small, weak creature wanted to risk his life to save people who hated him, people who would probably kill him if they got the chance. Thekvar tried one more time to convince Wu to stay safe in the cave, but the human's mind was made up. They left at first light, though light meant little in the storm. The world outside was a howling wall of white. Wu could barely see Thekvar, even though the Kirathi was right beside him. The deep snow came up to Wu's chest, but Thekvar pushed through it like it was water. The big Kirathi stayed close, using his body to block the worst of the wind from his smaller companion. Even with protection, the cold tried to kill Wu with every step. His modified suit worked, but just barely. Ice formed on his helmet's faceplate. His feet went numb inside the thick boots. After an hour of fighting through the storm, they reached the buried wreckage of the Resilience. The ship was almost completely covered in snow now, just a metal hill in the endless white landscape. Wu led them to the right section of the ship. His suit's lights cut through the darkness inside the broken corridors. Everything was frozen, solid, but the parts they needed were still there. The power core was a heavy cylinder the size of a barrel. Even with Thekvar's great strength, moving it through the storm would be nearly impossible. But they also needed control circuits, heating elements, and power cables. Working quickly, they gathered everything they could carry. Thekvar loaded the heaviest parts onto his back. Wu took the smaller but equally important components. The journey back was worse than the trip out. They were tired now and carrying heavy loads. The storm seemed to be getting stronger, if that was possible. Halfway back to the cave, Wu fell, down in the snow, and could not get up. The cold had finally beaten his modified suit. His legs would not work anymore. Thekvar could have left him there. Could have taken the parts and saved his own people, letting the human die in the storm. Instead, he picked up Wu and carried him along with all the equipment. The big Kirathi's strength was incredible, but even he had limits. Wu could feel Thekvar's breathing getting harder, his steps becoming unsteady. They made it back to the cave just as Thekvar's strength gave out completely. Both of them collapsed inside the entrance, gasping and shaking from cold and exhaustion. But they had the parts. Wu's hands were too numb to work at first. Thekvar had to warm them by the fire before the human could start building the heating system. Even then, it was difficult work with frozen fingers and equipment covered in ice. The device Wu built was not pretty, but it would work. A portable fusion heater that could warm a large area for days. The power core from the ship would run it, and the control circuits would keep it from overloading. When it was finished, Thekvar looked at the strange human machine with wonder. It was smaller than many of his tools, but Wu promised it could generate more heat than a dozen fires. Now came the hardest part, getting it to the tribal village before the storm killed everyone there. Thekvar would have to make the journey alone. Wu was too weak from their first trip to go out in the storm again. The human could barely stand, let alone walk 2 more kilometers through the killing cold. As Thekvar prepared to leave, Wu grabbed his arm. The human's grip was weak, but his eyes were strong. "Bring them back here," Wu said in careful Kirathi words. "All of them. Cave is big enough." Thekvar understood. Instead of just taking the heater to save his people where they were, he could bring them back to safety. The cave was large and warm. It could hold the whole tribe until the storm passed, but that meant asking his people to accept shelter from the sky demon they hated. Thekvar looked at his human friend one more time. Then he picked up the heating device and stepped back out, into the storm. The wind swallowed him immediately, leaving Wu alone by the fire to wait and hope. Wu waited by the fire for 6 hours. Every few minutes he looked toward the cave entrance, hoping to see Thekvar return. The storm continued to rage outside, showing no signs of weakening. Had his friend made it to the village? Was the heating device working? Were the Kirathi people still alive? These questions ate at Wu's mind as he fed wood to the fire and tried to stay warm. His body still ached from their journey to the crashed ship. His hands were wrapped in bandages where the cold had damaged his skin. Finally, he heard voices. In the storm. Not just one voice, but many. Thekvar appeared at the cave entrance covered in snow and ice. Behind him came other Kirathi, including the scarred elder who had threatened Wu before. Men, women, and children of all ages stumbled into the cave, shaking from cold and fear. Wu quickly moved away from the fire to give them room. He watched as 23 members of Thekvar's tribe crowded into his friend's home. They were all alive, but barely. Many showed signs of severe cold exposure. Some of the children were barely conscious. The scarred elder, whose name Wu had learned was Gorak Nal, looked around the cave with suspicious eyes. When he saw Wu, his face twisted with anger and disgust. But he said nothing. Survival was more important than pride right now. Thekvar immediately began helping his people. He built up the fire and brought out all his stored food and furs. The children were placed closest to the warmth. The injured were given medicinal herbs that Thekvar kept for emergencies. Wu wanted to help, but every time he moved toward the group, some of the Kirathi growled at him. They might accept shelter in his friend's cave, but they still saw him as a dangerous sky demon. So Wu stayed back and helped in ways they could not see. He adjusted his LED lights to give better illumination. He used his knowledge of medicine to quietly suggest treatments to Thekvar. When the cave's ventilation became poor with so many people inside, he found ways to improve the airflow. As the night went on, the Kirathi began to recover from their brush with death. The children started to move around and play quietly. The adults talked in low voices about their close escape. Thekvar told them how the journey had gone, how he had fought through the storm for 2 hours to reach their village, how he had found their shelters collapsing and many people already unconscious from the cold. The heating device Wu had built had saved them. It had warmed the main shelter, long enough for everyone to regain their strength. Then Thekvar had convinced them to follow him back through the storm to safety. Some had refused at first. They would rather die than accept help from a sky demon's technology. But as the storm grew worse and death came closer, even the proudest warriors had changed their minds. Now they were alive because of that choice. On the second day, a young Kirathi female named Sul Wen approached Wu carefully. She was carrying a small child who had been hurt during the storm. The child's arm was clearly broken. Sul Wen did not speak to Wu directly, but she set the child down near him and pointed at the injury. Her message was clear. She had seen him helping Thekvar with medical knowledge. Could he help her child? Wu nodded and gently examined the broken arm. Using materials from his medical kit and techniques he had learned in Spacefleet training, he set the bone properly and created a splint. The child cried during the treatment, but felt better afterward. Word spread quietly through the group. The Sky Demon had healing knowledge. Over the next few days, more Kirathi came to Wu for help. An elder with infected wounds, a warrior with a dislocated shoulder, a mother whose baby was having trouble breathing in the cave's dry air. Each time Wu helped without asking for anything in return. He shared his medical supplies freely. He taught Thekvar new healing techniques that could help the tribe in the future. The Kirathi began to see him differently, not as a monster or invader, but as someone who cared about their welfare. The change was slow, but it was real. Gorak Nal was the last to accept what was happening. The proud elder watched Wu help his people, but his face remained hard and angry. He still believed sky demons brought nothing but trouble. That changed on the 4th day. Gorak Nal's own grandson, a boy of about 10 years, developed a high fever. The child's temperature rose quickly, and he began having seizures. None of the traditional Kirathi medicines helped. Thekvar came to Wu with desperate eyes. The child was dying, and there was nothing more his people could do. Wu recognized the symptoms immediately. It was a bacterial infection, probably caused by drinking contaminated water during the storm. Without proper treatment, the boy would be dead within hours. But Wu had antibiotics in his emergency medical kit. Not many, but enough. He prepared the medicine and approached Gorak Nal carefully. The elder was holding his dying grandson, tears running down his scarred face. Wu knelt beside them and showed the elder the medicine. In his limited Karathi vocabulary, he explained what it would do, how it could save the child's life. Goraknal stared at the small medical injector for a long moment. His pride warred with his love for his grandson. Finally, love won. He nodded. Wu gave the boy the injection and stayed with him through the night. The fever broke just before dawn. The child opened his eyes and asked for water in a weak but clear voice. Goraknal looked at Wu with new eyes. This sky demon had saved his grandson's life with no thought of reward or recognition. The elder stood up slowly and said something in formal Karathi language. Thekvar translated, his voice filled with emotion. He says you are no longer a sky demon. You are Karathi friend, brother to our people. The storm finally ended on the 7th day. The Karathi prepared to return to their village to rebuild their damaged shelters. But before they left, something remarkable happened. Goraknal approached Wu with a carved bone pendant. It was the symbol of tribal adoption, marking Wu as an honorary member of their people. You saved us from the cold, the elder said in careful, human words he had been practicing. Now you are family. 2 months later, a human rescue ship detected the emergency beacon from the crashed Resilience. When they landed near the wreckage, they expected to find only bodies and debris. Instead, they found Captain Kim Wu alive and healthy, living among the native people as a respected healer and teacher. He had learned their language and customs. They had learned human technology and medicine. The rescue team was amazed. They had come to recover a corpse and instead found a miracle of interspecies cooperation. When they offered to take Wu back to human space, he surprised them with his answer. I will visit, he said. I need to file my report and arrange for proper first contact protocols. But this is my home now. These are my people. Thekvar stood beside his human brother, and both of them smiled. The cold had not won after all.